How's it going, everybody? So in the last video we put the struts back together after we made the modifications that needed to be done to them to accommodate the longer hardware which is necessary for the lift blocks that sit on top of the struts. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to show the final step that needs to be done, which is a slight modification to the bottom portion of the strut housing for it to clear the control arm when you're turning back and forth at full droop. Which, you know, the car is probably not going to be there very often, but we want to make sure we have that clearance for when we jack the car up, doing service on it, or, you know, for when we're taking it off any sweet jumps. You know, don't want to be rubbing. So this part was just a little bit confusing to me reading the instructions. So I would like to read the instructions to you as they're written, and then what I'll do is I'll actually throw the strut back in the car without the modification to show you what it's actually saying. So here we can say it says trim the bottom corner of your front struts opposite the spindle mount camber bolt holes. This will allow the stock strut bottom to still clear the control arms at full droop. Maybe a 3/8 triangle off the corner should do it. If you do not understand the step, install the strut with new bolts, turn the wheel at full droop. The bottom of the strut housing will contact the control arm and stop the wheel from turning. So I didn't fully understand what they meant. I thought it was on the spindle side that needed to be trimmed, and that didn't make sense to me. So I went and actually put the strut back on the car to see if it needed to be done, and at first I didn't think it did, but then when I started moving it around, it was very close, and it was actually preventing me from getting the bottom bolt in the strut and spindle because I couldn't slide it far enough over before the strut housing contacted the control arm. So got my modified strut over here with all the stuff you saw in the last video done to the top of it. The bottom of it, nothing has been done. As you can see, we got a big open hole right there. We're gonna go stab this guy back in. So I'll show you what we do there. Pretty much the reversal of the removal. If you missed that, that's back in the first video. We took this out off of this side actually. So I'll show you throwing it back in there. So what we've done here is I had the nuts on top of these bolts just to keep the spacer from coming off and keep the bolts from, you know, rattling around loose. I just set my new hardware up on top so it's nice and easy to put on once I get this thing poked up in there. So what I'm gonna try to do now, pardon my crappy camera angles. I don't have a stand or a tripod or anything yet, so I just ordered one, so I won't have to prop my phone up on random things that I have laying around the shop. So this will be another shot of just propping my phone against something and hoping it stays, so I'm sorry in advance. Here we go. So I just have the strut in here kind of loosely right now. I just kind of half put the bolts in because this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to be taking this right back out after I turn the video off here. But what I want to show is what actually needs to be trimmed on this strut. If I can get my light where it wants to be and focus, you can see this corner of the strut is actually hitting, or very close to hitting, the control arm right there. So it is that corner of the strut that we want to take off. And let me take this back out and I'll show you it's not going to damage the housing at all. It's not going to compromise any strength. So it's nothing to really worry about. Let's get it out and I'll show you. So with the strut out of the car again here, we can take a good look at the bottom, what's really going on. So you can see there's just, the inside at the bottom of the chamber that the insert goes in is right there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this corner off pretty much right into the bottom of that. And that'll give us plenty of room for what we need to clear the control arm. So we're gonna come down, about like that far and just take a, pie shaped piece right off of there. All right, I'll get that zipped off and show you what it looks like. All right, so had the strut and the vise. You can see we cut the corner off of the bottom of the strut. So it was straight across here. So we took, just about 3/8 of an inch off. Yeah, cleaned it up nice on the edges. So that should give us plenty of room to clear the control arm now, which will be super duper good. So we'll get this out of the vise, we'll go throw it back in the car. All right, so now we're back over at the car. One thing that I'm gonna do is there was this whole gasket up here that went between the strut and the body. It was all old and falling apart, so I'm just taking it off and I'm just gonna put it right on the body. I think it'll be okay. So just wanted to show that. I'm just taking the gasket off. I don't think it makes a huge difference whether it's in or not. I'm sure it's probably just absorb some noise and keep moisture out of the engine bay. So we'll get our hardware holding the spacer off, get these nuts off so we can just pop it right back in, and I'll show you what we got to do for that. Okay, so for getting this back in here, because this is so much taller than the car is used to, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna actually have to push down. I don't know how well you can see this, if you can even see it at all, but you're gonna have to push down on the spindle and control arm and kind of flex it down to be able to get the slot here that your spindle goes in, and to clear the control arm when you're bringing this thing in. So what we'll do, we're gonna stick the bottom in and over, rotate it up, push down on our control arm to get it sort of situated in the right area. Now what I do is I get my top mounting hardware lined up and I'm gonna just start them. So that'll hold the top of the strut where it wants to be, and then I can manipulate the bottom and the spindle to where I need it to be to get my bolts in. So I'll kind of show you a little trick I found for doing that. So hardware on the top is in finger tight, so we can still move all this around and get things lined up on the bottom here. I'm gonna try to tip you down a little bit and have that stay. Maybe it'll stay. So kind of float this around and get our bottom bolt in. And the bolt on the bottom of the strut and the control arm is the one without the eccentric. The one with your eccentric for adjusting your camber goes on the top. You'll see a little flat, a little boss that sticks out that eccentric is going to push on to move that wheel in and out. So I found with the spindle and hub tipped out like this, with pushing up and down on it, you can get the bottom bolt hole for the spindle lined up a lot easier without having to use punches or anything silly like that. And then what you can do once you get that in, you just fold it up, put your top bolt in, you're good to go. So I'm going to manipulate this around a little bit so I can get my bottom bolt in, and then we'll put the top one in. We'll line up our marks that we put in before we took this all apart for our camber adjustment, and then we should be pretty good to go. So just like that, I was able to slide that bolt through. The way that I do bolts on suspension, because you don't want suspension bolts coming out. So I always try to stick them front to back. So the head of the bolt is facing the front of the car. So even if the nut does come off, if the bolt was facing this way and the nut came off, it could work its way out and fall out of the car, and then your suspension falls apart. So what I do is I put the head facing towards the front of the car. So even if the nut falls out, the forces and the movement in the car, it's less likely to work its way forward and fall out than backwards and fall out. So that's just the way I do it. So yeah, what we'll do, rotate this up in. The top bolt goes in no problem. And on your top bolt, you're going to have a washer like this guy. There's a flat in it, which corresponds to a flat on the bolt. So that clocks your eccentric so it's in the right spot. So be sure to put that back on. And your nut for your bottom bolt can go back in now. It's actually kind of funny. This I knew the struts on this thing were pretty shot. Just by moving them in and out, they really did not dampen very much at all. So they will get replaced at some point, and that point is not now. There's a lot of other stuff to do on this car, but it's interesting, when I trimmed the bottom of the strut housing, it opened up a little crack area, and these cartridges are supposed to be sealed units in here, and this one has obviously gotten so bad that the cartridge has come apart, and it's leaking oil out of the bottom of the housing. Which the other side did not do. So this side is especially shot. So yeah, those inserts might have just gone a little bit higher on the list of things to do. But now that it's together, just loose, I'll show you the extra clearance we have down here between the strut and the control arm. Yeah. So, grab my light. If I can get a good angle here. So you see the oil that is leaking out, but you can also see, this will stay, we have a good gap in here now. You know, it's not a lot. I can just get my pinky finger in there, but that is going to be plenty for what we need. You know, the few times that this car is actually going to be at full droop in its normal suspension travel, that'll be fine for what we're looking for. So what I'm going to go do now is, with all the hardware in, I'm going to just go tighten it all down. I'm going to line my marks back up on my camber eccentric, line those back up, get it kind of close to where it was before, you know, good enough for what it is for right now. Tighten everything down, and then the front of this car with the lift is all done. Besides, you know, an alignment later on, which you'll definitely need, and later on down the line, I'll probably address the angle that the tie rods are at, because they're not level anymore, so it'll get some pretty serious bump steer. I got a few ideas how to try to remedy that. There's also some ideas in the instructions that came with the kit. So I'll go through, weigh the options, and we'll show that later on down the road. So for now, I'm going to tighten this up, and then it's about 10:30 at night, so I'm going to call it a night after I get this tightened, and call the front of this car done for the moment. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.